Yeah, I mean, we're recording now, so I guess we should just start with one of those days, right?
Yes, one of those days. So, just for your listeners to just understand, so Shiva and I have been riffing a little bit. We have never met, and he just came on a little late and he said, "Oh, it's just been one of those days." So, as the show up person, this was way too awesome of an entry for me to not kind of take it by the reins and run with it and say, well, that must refer to modern society, right? It doesn't refer to how we're designed to show up, right? So let's just dive in because you're also an anthropologist in addition to a software engineer and top 5 podcast host, Shiva. So go right ahead and explain what you mean by one of those days.
Yeah, so um, I guess if I were to, since I'm being put on spot here on the courtroom, if I had to defend myself here, um, you know, I love what I do, and I can't wait to be doing that, doing what I love all day. But unfortunately, as many can relate, you kind of have to have something to survive, right? So I do have a 9 to 5 day job, and I knew one of these days that was gonna collide just at the right moment to where I have to be like, hey, so sorry, I just need a few minutes to get some bearings here, and I'm running around answering emails and questions and all that. So it was one of those. I got on a couple minutes late. I'm like, hey, Marcy, I just need a few minutes to answer some messages and just kind of calm down for a quick second because I don't want to run around and jump right into a conversation. So my quick answer to Marcy was, hey, Marcy, can I just have a second? It's one of those days. And she was like, yes, but what I didn't know was she was about to grill into me. So let's
Oh,
hear
no.
it.
No, no, I'm not drilling into you at all. And you just raised so many rich things, which is how do we truly show up amidst the flow, right? And the flow is sometimes easy and we can be with people in a deep way with the energy and the kind of attention system from the right side of our brain that feels connected. Right? You just downshifted with me, Shiva. I just felt your body shift and your attention come right into the middle of this space with me. So that instead of being you and me, we're this third thing in the middle. What's going on is actually shown in MRI scanners, and it's called I think it's interpersonal neural connectivity. And what's going on is that your brain and my brain are doing this. We're in essence one single wave. And that shift is what you were striving for when you said, give me a minute, right? Because life's inevitable flows, sometimes there's the rapids that are right next to the calm. And that's what you were dealing with. It's also really interesting because you're a software engineer, which is around abstracted things. It's around code. It's not the real world. And it's also around control because it only works when you can predict every use case so that people don't end up with an error message. Right. So,
Right.
but we'll just park that and come back to it because the way you think to do that job and the way that you think to pursue your passion, right? Discussing life and learning, those are very different things. So like what are your thoughts? And please accept my apology. There's no grilling and there's no defense. We're we're all just flowing together. Okay. We're all just drops in the same river, same ocean.
Yeah. Would you mind rephrasing the question?
Yeah, so I just want to just help you to recognize that I loved how real you showed up, and I thought that it might be important to capture that, right? And I'm hoping that you feel so too. So I guess my only question is, um, are you now comfortable and you're you feel successful in what you did because you just shifted. That's what all of us are really striving to do each day. It's kind of come back to the way we want to be in the moment.
Yeah. It's it's definitely a balancing act for sure. I find that the most fruitful conversations are when I'm totally present, very active and listening. And that's how a conversation should be, right? It's not you speak, I'm thinking what to say next. I speak, you say something different. We just instead of right,
You're right, right.
there's
I know that.
that wavelength you were talking about isn't there, right?
Right.
It's just two people on camera just spitting back and forth. But I find when you're very present, the conversations are more fruitful. So I try to get in that state of presence before the recording, and that's
Mm.
kind of what was happening here. Was there was all these things I need to put out real quick. Um, so then I was like, okay, let me just let you in real fast that I need a few minutes to kind of bring everything back. And then I took a couple seconds for myself, became more present, and then um, jumped in.
Amazing success. Shiva, that's what everyone wants to be able to do. So, do you mind sharing with us how you did it? Because that's what
hmm
truly showing up is all about. So, I'd love to hear what led you to be so successful just now.
I'd say partially systems help, right? So in a time like this, or even in a similar circumstance I've been in, where I was recording with a guest and about 5, 8 minutes into the show, the mic just completely just went dark, and it's never happened before, wasn't sure, and we had to stop the recording in mid conversation, and I'm trying to figure out where's the backup mic in this whole place, and set that up and link it in and continue the conversation before that momentum kind of dies down. So what I'm trying to get at here is I think partially what helped is a good system. It was everything is so ready that I can turn on the lights, the camera, and everything, just systems just there for me
Right.
to just set up and go.
Mm.
But from apart from the system side, I guess on the mindset side, which I guess you're also curious about here,
Right.
is taking a moment to yourself, just a deep breath,
Yep.
remembering where you are, and then kind of just becoming, you know, I guess partially for me, it's also this sense of appreciation, gratitude that we're
Yeah.
going to have this amazing conversation.
Yeah.
I really enjoy having these conversations with guests, so I try to bring my best foot forward. Um, I think if you can find a cause outside of yourself, it tends to drive
Oh
you
my
to
God.
excellency more.
Find a cause outside of yourself. And you said bring appreciation and gratitude. So I think I have some charts that relate to what you just said. And I also want to mention first those three things are core to showing up. Appreciate, and they're separate. These are mutually exclusive things. Appreciation, gratitude, and a cause outside of myself. And it's not just outside of, it's larger than.
Mm,
Are you with
well said.
me? So, and we haven't defined showing up, we can get back to it, but I want to stay with what you said and build on, right? Respond to actually that in a very conscious way, avoiding doing what you said other supposed conversations do. Con means with. Really, when you're doing that, and one person's just saying this and then someone else is coming out of nowhere. I call that a universation, as in like unicycle, like one. It's a one
Yeah,
versation, like it's not a con, it's a with. If anything, it may be an adversation
yeah,
or a
yeah.
misversation. I don't know. Anyway, so what you were talking about, finding something larger than yourself. So before we practice showing up, there's a me and there's a you, and there's a small we right in the middle. And for those just listening, I'm showing a bunch of diagrams that I'm gonna send to Shiva. That'll be in the show notes. These are the core diagrams that describe the mindset of how nature designed human beings to show up. Once we practice showing up, we get to what you were saying, right? There's a me and there's a you, but there's something outside of both of us. That is this we, right? And then there's also society. Um, Showing up recognizes that we don't exist in a single role. You aren't just Shiva, and I'm not just Marcy. We
Mhm.
actually exist in two more roles, and this is what people really miss. And once you hear them, you're like, "Oh my goodness, why wasn't this explained to me just from birth or in, first grade?" So our second role is a member of a situation. We are situation members at every moment. It doesn't matter if you're laying in bed or brushing your teeth or listening to a podcast or at dinner or in a meeting. There's always a situation. And I can explain what that is. Most people don't actually know what a situation truly is. And then our third role is societal member. So you said a member of something not,
Mhm.
beyond yourself. And then we agreed that it's bigger than yourself. So we're society members, situation members, and selves. So those are the three roles in which we always show up. Strangely enough, in my book,
So would you say situational is m- maybe another way to say it is just environment based? Is it's who we are in certain environments? Is that what that is?
I'll explain what a situation is here. I'm just quickly going to show you the
Okay.
diagram and then I'll explain it.
Yeah.
These are the three roles in which we always show up.
Uh-huh.
There's
Self situation
self,
society.
situation, society, right? And it's irrefutable. Like nature designed us this way. As Aboriginal humans living in caves, maybe even grunting, okay? We were still an individual self within a situation and a member of something larger beyond ourselves. Call it a tribe, call it society. This has always been. There's a skill for each role, which we can talk about. And then, of course, if you can see this, there's a level one, two, three. There's a quality level, and we can get to it. But let me explain what a situation is, because Shiva, if your listeners leave with only one thing, this will change their lives. What is a situation? What is this thing that we're in, right? Well, right now, if it has your attention, it has actually taken up inhabitants inside your mind and inside your body. So the first thing a situation is, if I'm going to encapsulate what I just said, it's something that we are deeply interlinked with, that uses our body as the receptive vessel that it truly is. Like we don't stop at our skin and our skull. Our skin isn't plastic. We actually feel stuff. This is a permeable membrane, as is our vision, as is our hearing. Everything goes in. And once it goes in, it changes us. It changes our physiology. It changes how we feel. It changes our temperature. It changes our heart rate. It changes everything. So, a situation is, in essence, this reverberative process that we are interacting with and that is interacting with us at every moment. So, how you're looking at me right now is changing me. The sunshine, the depth of safety that we each feel. Is someone about to attack us or not? Right. So that is what a situation is. It is what is happening all around us that is going in and coming out. Right. It is a reverberative process that we perceive, that changes us, and then we respond. So it's input, response, input, response, input, and it's always going on. And the moment we think about something across the globe, even though it's not immediately in front of us, it's part of our situation as well, because it's changing us. When we think about the news this morning, the latest death toll from what's going on in Israel, right, and the West Bank more broadly, my heart just shifted, and yours probably did too, right? So that is what a situation is. It is this alive thing that is changing how we think, feel, and act right now. Are you with me?
Yeah.
It's big. It is big. And that's our second role. So we have a self role, a situation member role, and then we have a societal member role.
Is the situational version of us still the authentic version of us, or is it a version of us that's controlled by external circumstances?
You're awesome. I love you so much as a human being. You're like you're straight to the core of what everyone wants to know. So you said, is the situational version of us authentic, or is it what created by the outside?
Yeah, is it manipulated by just external circumstances, or is that really who we are to some extent?
That is there's so much in what you just said. So is it created by the outside or is it manipulated? So every moment we're responding to the outside. Okay. If we have some kind of part inside of us that is a defense that needs to keep us safe, that we learned maybe when we were so young that it was before that it's a preconscious thing, right? We might feel unsafe and then show up in an inauthentic way that's not true to ourselves, but that we've learned to do. And by the way, there's intelligence in that, and we can get back to it. So you can say that that's not authentic, but if it's something we've learned to do, maybe we're aware of it, maybe we're not. But so maybe it is our authentic self because we learn to be that way. But I think you were getting at, does the external world change us? Is that what you're asking? The external world is constantly impacting us, and it's up to us how we respond to it. And that's a skill. The skill showing up has, each one of our roles has a skill. The self role. Would you like to hear what those are? And this is so basic. Once you hear it, you're going to be like, my God, like that's just common sense. Our self role, we want to be grounded in who we are. So that's the authentic piece. Grounding in like the one phrase definition, and there's a whole chapter on this, of course, but the one phrase is knowing who we are and why. For example, recognizing a defense that we might respond and like protect ourselves. A lot of people have I can't talk about that, or I have to be quiet now to keep myself safe, right? Part of us. Anyway, the role for the skill for our situational role, readiness. Now, what does that mean? Because you can be ready for things that you can plan and prepare for, but what does it mean to be ready for the impromptu? This skill for the societal role, there's a special word in it. The definition is connectedness with intent to serve. The word I put on it is all intelligent. And the reason we needed a word is because we didn't have one. Do you want to know why I came up with all intelligent? So we're taught to be intelligent. But when you think about it, that only speaks to our self role. And it suggests that all the skills and knowledge we need to achieve and to be happy and all these things come from the inside. And Shifa, like, that's just wrong. It's also not, however, an out intelligence. All the skills and knowledge we need, it's not out there only in the podcasts and the books and the movies and right? It's actually in all. It's in nature. It's in the design of the universe. It's in the design of all of our systems. It's just out there in our lived experience as well. So it's an all intelligence to me is a word that explains the skill for our role as societal member. Is that making sense? There's a collective nature of the skill itself.
So, what is the difference here between calling something all intelligence and intelligence?
Because in intelligence leads to the whole belief system that to succeed in life, the skill is inside of us. It's inside, but it's not inside, it's all side, if you will. So if you just look at the word in, right? Individual. How we succeed with our mirror just focused on us, it's all about us? No. As you say, you were grounding yourself in being with the more that's out there. You took your mirror and you turned it outward. So what you did is you merged really your self role with your situational with your societal role, and of course you brought it to the moment into the
Mhm.
situation. Here, I'm going to show you. Remember this? I'll just ground you first in this. You made
Yeah.
the we bigger, but you in but how did that happen? This is self situation. Or that's society. This is situation. So what you did is you came into the situation more deeply. And that's exactly what you said you were doing. You wanted to be more present right here, right now. So the model of how we show up explains how that happens. I had to do it.
Yeah. I love that. It's, this idea of we and being any interaction you have with someone, right? Because that is the situation at hand. Or I guess if it's multiple people, then societal. But I love your book, how we choose to show up, because in my eyes, I think, there's definitely a few ideas floating here, but one that comes to mind is this idea of presence. um, how you present yourself, how you present yourself in a situation, how you present yourself to society, how you present yourself to yourself, right? And I think a huge thing that many people struggle with is this trust within themselves,
Mm,
right? They say they're going to do something, they don't do it. Nobody knows that they set this goal and they didn't do it
mm,
except them, which starts this negative feedback loop of, you said you were going to read 10 books, you didn't even read one. You can't, what do you mean you're a reader? And you start having these, this loop of thoughts, and that starts a very difficult cascade. So I think, this idea of choosing to show up in all three of those categories is so important and can't be neglected at any of those stages.
I love that. I love that. Is it okay if I go deep on a few of the things you said?
Yeah.
The first thing you said is we present ourselves, right? How we present. Um, okay, present. Let's not present. No. How about be? So it's not how we present ourselves, it's how we are. It's how we show up. So that's the first.
What about represent?
Or represent. I think that's how you said. I'm sorry. That was the word rep.
No, no, I did
How
say
you represent
present.
yourself. So the words that we use create all of our beliefs and our biases and our
Right.
behaviors and our emotions and our health. So let's choose our words. You said represents. How about how we are? How we
Yeah.
are. If we keep talking about presenting, well, doesn't that really kind of have implied like a lack of genuineness, right? When we just talk about how we are, that's what's real. So shifting words can change who we are. The example about you had a goal, you didn't tell anyone, you were going to read ten books. I love that. And then you kind of start to beat yourself up, right? And then you have negative self talk, and then you have a spiral downward. Um, Regarding that, if we think about how am I showing up, to this decision of wanting to identify as a reader and wanting to grow myself through reading 10 books. Once you think about that, it's like, well, what is my self role in this? What does the situation, like, how does the situation in the life of a reader come alive? So now you're picturing yourself sitting in your favorite place with a nice light on to focus on your book. And now you visualized achieving your goal. Maybe you even know right away what the first book is that you're going to read because it's in your mind now. And now you're far more likely to go and do it. And then your societal member role comes alive because now you're going to be able to like mention when something comes up. I was just reading this book about da da da, and this is what it says, right? And Marcy Axelrod talks about this and like how we're showing up. So all of a sudden, the moment you know the model and you know that you're in three roles, it changes everything. And there's no ability to not be authentic because the lexicon of showing up is what nature designed. It is real. Be grounded in yourself, be ready for your moments, and be connected with intent to serve with something beyond ourselves, right? It's simply how we evolve from nature.
Yeah, there's so many, caveats or so many segues I could take from here, but staying at a high level of what we're talking about, this idea of being present in what you do.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, so you know, there would I totally drew a blank. Would you remind me what we just referred back to?
You were talking about being present in what we do. And what I was basically speaking about is when you remember that you're always in three roles, you kind of think about things differently, and it's very hard to not be authentic or to like forget your goals because they just naturally start to step into them differently. Mhm.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So, going back to this book analogy that we're giving here, what I think is very interesting, and this was a thought of mine I had recently, maybe a few weeks back, that shifted my perspective
Yeah.
was, and it goes on this topic of authenticity and presence, is I've always, for years, last several years, I had this goal of I want to read this many books, 20 books this year, 30 books this year. I had this number. But if you boil it all the way back down to what's the point? What's the purpose? Why is this goal even there?
Yeah.
Right? It all boiled back down to I want to learn, I want to be a reader. I just want to read, right? I want to learn, I want to read. So, does it really mean if I read 19 books instead of 20, does that not make me a reader? Right? So then when you look at it that way, you realize the quantity is just so I can tell people. Like it's really what it is, right? It's like I read 52 books this year. It's the fact that we can say that, right? Nobody knows how well you read it. Nobody knows if you applied even a single thought from any 52 books.
Yeah.
It's just the mere act of saying, you know, I read 52 books. So then that almost goes back to this idea of inauthenticity because you're just trying to present, right? You're trying to present yourself as a reader when the whole goal this whole time was just to read. If I read one book for 3 months, but I got so much out of it, I
Right.
think I'd still be a reader. And if anything, probably have way more benefits than if I just, quickly went through 6 books
Right.
because I'm 3 books behind this month, right? So I don't know. What do you think about this idea?
Yeah, it's really interesting. What I think I heard in there is an identity that, quote, needs to be seen as a reader. Is that accurate? You want it to be seen as a reader. And there are four of these pitfalls that we have. There's needs to be seen as, there's I deserve, there's lesser than, I'm lesser than, and then there's I'm better than. But anyway, sticking to needs to be seen as, it's interesting. how did you grapple with the underlying um desire of being a learner? You want to be a learner, right? With this, I need to be seen as a reader and I have to just tick the box so that I can talk about, hey, I did my 20 books.
Yeah, I mean, with this idea, so learning for me has always given some sort of benefit here or there at some point in life.
Mhm.
And I remember being young and my mom telling me, you know, just because you went through something and you didn't see an immediate return doesn't mean that skill, didn't it isn't valuable, right? Just because we learn something now and can't apply it immediately doesn't make that a less valuable skill. Maybe it just takes time to be applied in the right situation, like
Yeah.
we talk about. So this love for learning has always been there, but my interest in reading has not. So in order to push me in that direction was okay, 20 books, right? Let's set a quantity goal. But when you boiled it down, it was never about the quantity,
Right.
right? And I think you can even relate this to a fitness goal. Most people will say, I want to lose this amount of weight. I want to lose 50 pounds, 20 pounds. But
The process.
when you see many of those people, maybe they hit it, maybe they don't, but the system and that identity is not in place enough to continue after that goal has been hit. So I think this idea of for certain goals, and maybe we could even specify which goals those are, but there are certain goals that I don't think having this quantity number is even helpful in any regard. I think it's more of an identity shift than a goal.
Yeah. Yeah. So really it's a process. What you want to do is absorb the process, right? Ingratiate yourself to the process. The process is sitting down with a book and reading a single word. A single word. You got to make the goal so simple that you like trip over it getting out of bed. It's just done. It's just done, right? If you want to, you can take a single page of a book, like tear out the page and like put it next to your toothbrush so that while you're brushing your teeth at a minimum you're going to read a single word. The interesting thing about humans is that once we do one thing, we naturally do the next thing and the next thing and the next thing and the next thing, right? I'm I just had this memory of uh General, I want to say McCorkle, it's not McCraven's um well-known video of training Navy SEALs. And he says, and it's called Make Your Bet. You get up and you make your bet. I mean, imagine like Navy SEALs, and he shows them like swimming with sharks and almost dying, and it's so hard. But the title of the video is Make Your Bet, right? And the point that he's making is you achieve start and do one thing, one simple thing, and it flows into the next and the next. So focus on the process, not the reading 20 books. You and I fail in the same way, or at least in one of many of the same ways that we've identified, which is we set a goal that's too big and then we don't get it done. We set your set your goal so low, so the one word, and make it a process, um, such that you're not looking at reading X number of books. You are looking at the process of reading a single word. And then, of course, you'll read the line, and then maybe you'll read the paragraph. And then at some point, probably in not the not too distant future, you'll turn the page. And that's both a physical thing and the metaphor of, and then at some point you'll be looking at the back cover of the book because you turn the last page and then you go and pick up that next book. Yeah. I mean, so showing up relates to this in that every moment of every day, inescapably, we are showing up. You can never get out of it. You're never not showing up. The question is how conscious do you make it, right? And by the way, it's not a peripheral feature of our operating system, right? As I speak to someone who lives with code, right? It's our defining characteristic. So the process focused of achieving goals is very much a show up mindset because life is a flow. If we apply the metaphor of is light, Is light a particle or a wave, right? You don't accomplish nearly as much when you're looking at this moment, tick, 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 without the connectedness, because really it's a wave, it's a flow. We do move from one thing to the next to the next. And how early or late we went to bed really does change the next day. There's nothing that you can do, right? Everything relates to everything else. I'll make one more point on this, and then I'd love your response. Everything relates to everything else. Here's the point. Relationality of everything is primary. It's primary. That's a big deal, and it's quantum physical. How you relate to me, how we relate to the situations of our lives, and it started in the founding of the universe because there was antimatter and matter, and they weren't even. If they were even, nothing would have happened. The way that they related is that one force was more than the other, and it led to motion. And now we have all that there is. So we are relating to everything at every moment. And I'll pause there because I don't want to take our podcast into like neverland for people. But the point is that you're never not showing up. You're never not relating to is. So we can talk in a moment about what do you do with that and like what decisions do we make? How does it help you achieve these goals? But what
Hmm. Yeah, I feel like there's so much to unpack here because starting with this idea of the self section that we've been talking about,
yep.
I think another strong point that it builds is that confidence and trust in yourself, just doing the small things. And I don't know how many people can relate, but something that's, and I'm still working on this, is I like to jump. I like to jump in the deep end and go straight in. But time and time again, it just never works because you move in too fast. That momentum isn't built. That motion that you've been talking about, this relationality, isn't there because you go from nothing to too much. So, something that's been incredibly helpful for me was this idea of compounding growth in whatever you're doing, right? You started with that word, and naturally, you might find yourself in this state of, that's an interesting point. Let me read the next paragraph. And then you start reading more out of interest. And I think that's where that identity shift starts to develop
Mm,
into someone who is that reader.
mm,
Um, Interestingly enough, like for example, let's say I'm making social media content or clips or all this extra editing work. What was so hard was this daunting task of learning some new tasks and not being good at it, and there were, all these resistance. So I told myself, okay, I'm just going to make one small piece of content every day, just a small snippet. What naturally started happening was, well, that could be better. I could do this one better. I could make this change. I could do two now. I mean, I'm doing these pretty fast. And naturally, you start adding more and more.
uh-huh.
So I think as humans, or at least myself, is we don't like that slow portion of that exponential curve. That part that is the identity builder. When you look at any exponential curve, is that whole identity builder is at that beginning when it looks like this, that nobody sees that small incremental difference until you see that inflection point and they go, wow, Shiva's read 200 books in the last few years, right? Like that's when you see that huge identity shift, is when someone has developed that skill, but it all starts from, that small change. If you already read, maybe you can push that goal a little stronger.
Mm,
If you don't read at all, you got to start somewhere, right?
mhm,
And like you said, just that one word is training yourself, your brain, and your what it's training your brain is the confidence aspect, is right. It's,
mm,
I said something, I did it. I read one word today. Tomorrow I read two words. Next it's a paragraph. Next it's a page, like you said. And then before you know it, you're reading the whole book and now you're doing another one and another. So I think there's something so strong to what you're saying here with this idea of starting small and just getting it done
mhm.
for yourself.
That's exactly right. Definitely start small. And it isn't just small. Start micro, start pico. Like,
Yeah.
it's the whole like one push-up thing. I mean, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
So
Fitness, anything works the same way.
yeah. So something really important I want to pick up on. So start small. Hu- you mentioned confidence, you mentioned identity. And so much of who we are is reflected from the outside in. Okay, this is our societal role, but let's park that. I want to get to how people feel about themselves, right? Because has that kind of been an undercurrent in what you're saying? How do you feel about yourself when you don't accomplish a goal? How do you feel about yourself when, going back to your mother speaking with you as a child about learning, right? And about being a learner. This is in your identity. And we don't like ourselves when we're not who we want to be and when we're constantly fighting against, I don't feel successful. I'm supposed to be this person, but I'm that person, right? So we make goals for ourselves. The word goal is a bit of a challenge in and of itself because really it's masking what's underneath. We have a set of values. What, for example, integrity. Well, really, we've hit our integrity when we want to be a learner and we're not because we say we're going to read and we're not. And the darn books are just sitting there. And then we show up, and the way that we show up to others and to ourselves is like we don't have those new ideas coming from those 3 books on the nightstand. We don't have the expansiveness in our thinking because we have made connections that are novel, that have brought us somewhere new. And now we're a different person for that friend or in that meeting. So there's an integrity issue and there's a loss. We feel a sense of loss. Am I hitting on something here? We feel a sense of loss and we are living with the loss of our own making. And it's like under the blanket and in the closet because we haven't really taken the time to reflect on why am I so angry? I haven't read those damn books. So I want to ground your listeners in what's underneath because once we get to what's underneath, we're far more able to stare at ourselves in a clean, honest way and let our real selves show up in kind of a natural flow. The way we get there, there's just one really important point here, Shiva. We've talked about doing stuff. And at the beginning, I spoke about being. The only way to be who we want is to reflect. We can't live with this do. Because reading a book without taking the moments to internalize, what is it? Wow. Is this really telling me this? I never thought it right. And this is a solo activity. You're not alone. There's a difference. You're solo. Alone can be desperate and impoverished, and it's an illness, right? There's all books out there about loneliness and how it's worse than a pack of cigarettes a day. I'm not talking about being alone as we reflect. I'm talking about being powerfully solo. Okay, solo is the god, alone is the shepherd. Okay, so when you reflect, you are massively empowered because that is the becoming process, right? And as you start to be, you're with the book reading, you are being. As you learn with the words and ideas, you are becoming. And then you start to feel a sense of belonging with the more that's out there. And that's what a lot of people are seeking. So that's the process being, becoming, belonging. Um, I read some similar things in Thomas Hubel's work. If anyone knows of him, he's a physician who has been doing a lot of collective healing work. And he started with, actually Arabs and Israelis, or maybe actually it was Germans and Israelis after the Holocaust. Anyway, Um, the point is reflect. And when I say, and so we just need to take the time to sit back and think, not just with our mind. It's not just a cognitive process. It's an embodied process. All right, I'm going to pause there because I said a lot of things, but I'm really hoping that this enables people to go from a goal to actually being who we all choose to be.
I love this topic because just the other day I had a thought when I was going on a walk about how this idea of reflection is actually learning, just like you're saying, which I found very interesting because the act of reflecting is looking at what works, what doesn't, and then making a change, right? Which is what learning is.
Yeah.
It's the rate at which you can change something based on some new knowledge that you developed,
Right.
right? So if you look at this idea that we're talking about of being and then becoming, I personally would add even this small portion of what we talked about before about the doing in front of that, because I think if you do, right, you start reading, you do, and then you do the reflection portion, that's the being or becoming portion,
Yeah.
either one. But I think there is this transition of it's not just about what you do, it's how you do it, what you're doing, and reflecting upon that.
Yeah.
Because like we said, I met people, I know people that have read books and then just next book, right? But what did you learn? What changed in your life because of that book, right? Or was there any point to it? So I think when we get so lost in this goal, we forget who we're trying to become, along the way. So I think it really, this whole idea of goals at times, I think, is just so elusive, right? Because what we're really going for is this identity of becoming, the systems that it takes to become that identity, right? I wake up at 8 a.m. every day and read for 30 minutes. Like that, we want that identity of becoming, right? Rather than I read 20 books this year, right? So I think there is this trade off here where
Mm.
I think the focus should be shifted more towards identity and systems than
Yes.
what exactly your goal is.
Yes. Absolutely. And your identity is really right now. How are you choosing to show up right now? Right now. When we attune to the moment, and I don't use the word presence, I use the word attuning because presence leads you to the gate, but it doesn't step you in. All right. So you might notice like you might have an awareness in a mindful way about what's going on right now. But when you truly attune, you're feeling with, right? So identity, like I'm wrestling with what you said about the goals and the identity because the mindset of showing up is that you're already there because it's based in the moment. It's right now. How are you showing up right now? Now, it doesn't mean that there isn't a distance between some things you want to achieve or that you want a few more things like under your belt that lead you to it, to more of the like identity that you're looking for. But the win is in there here and now. The win is in how am I choosing to show up right now? And there's a keyword there, and it happens to be circled. The word is choose. I don't say choice. I don't like, and I don't say decide. I say choose because it's active. I like the present progressive form of the word. Even I love you, it's loving. I'm loving you. You know what I'm saying? Either we're active and we're stepping into something or we're not.
Yeah.
Right. And so it changes this goal of I'm going to get up and read for 30 minutes to I am a reader and you know, I'm reading. And even the way you're showing up right now, if you don't have a book in front of you and reading it, it doesn't mean you're not learning. So it doesn't mean that the underlying goal isn't met. Yeah. And I think it's very important for people to reflect on that and to recognize that whatever they want to do, reflect on it, think about it. That's the wisdom. That's the experience that you then carry with you into the next moment. And it changes how you show up. So you're already doing what you need to do. You have to choose how you're showing up.
Yeah.
That's the key. And of course,
Yeah.
I explain how to do that. How much of the book have you read, by the way? And no, there's no finger pointing if you say, Marcy, have not gotten to it.
No, I actually, to be completely honest, haven't had a chance to read your book yet, but I'm actually very excited to dive in because I saw your book and it's definitely something that piqued my interest.
Why did it pique your interest?
I've definitely tackled with this idea of, and I know you say you don't choose this word, but this is the word that comes to mind is presence, or the idea of yourself in different environments, right? Alone versus society versus, situational, like we talked about. So this idea of, and I think this all stems back all the way to maybe the essence of personal growth, right?
Yeah.
This shortening of this dissonance of who I want to be and who I am
Right.
today,
Right.
um, and trying to shorten that gap. So I think naturally I tend to think about ideas like this of presence, of who I want to be, and even looking in this example of self, right? We realize it's not about goals.
Right.
It's about who we are. It's about identity. It's about what is our thoughts saying to us when we're alone, right? Are we in congruence with it, or is there this clash, this dissonance of, you're not a reader, you haven't read in years. Like, you keep saying that but you won't, right? So, and I actually think that dissonance grows stronger the more you put it off, right? If people see you buying books and you never read, they're going to be like, hey, you bought like 6 books, did you read those? And you'd be like, no. Or you might lie and that makes you feel even worse,
Okay.
right? So there's all these inauthentic moments that I think we want less of, right? We want to bring the authentic self as much as possible. So I really do think this idea of choosing and showing up and being present, all these things are very
Yeah.
important, because when you are your authentic self, I think you have the most fruitful interactions, conversations, experiences.
Yeah. 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 You are. And I mean, the self is every moment. Let's not forget this. You can never not show up. So don't beat yourself up about whatever goal you haven't gotten to. And maybe even look at the goal and say, should it be my goal? Maybe really what you want to do is learn. And maybe the way you really naturally learn is that you listen to podcasts or you listen to books on
Right.
Audible.
Or audiobooks, yeah.
Audiobooks, maybe sitting down and looking at words on a page with that kind of symbolic representation of ideas. Maybe it's just not how your brain naturally steps into things, right? We all process things in a different way. I recently had a very, very important contract negotiation that was going to change how I live. And we would agree to something on video, and the person would say, I've put it down now. It's in this. I'm going to send it and you can sign it. And I would say, well, I need to sit down and read it alone with no one else around so that I can think this through. And only then am I going to know, is this right for me? I literally needed to feel how my body felt as I read the words, because that's how my brain works. If I just heard someone's words, especially while I was looking at them, and it all sounded great, if I just signed that, that would be an extremely unself-aware thing for me to do. For other people, it's the opposite. They can sit and read it, but really what they need to do is talk to someone about it and interact with it, right? And then they're getting a sense, you know what, this feels right, it feels good, it feels true. I can sign this now, right? So I want to also put out for you, Shiva, and for your listeners, maybe if you're really hitting a wall with a darn goal, you got to look at it and say, what am I really trying to do here? And is this the right way to do it? Um, Reading books, by the way, right now in society is selected against. Society pushes us to be active and to do stuff. It doesn't really push us to sit down in a quiet space without our phone near us and to actually pick up a book. So let's just kind of recognize that we aren't living in a society that makes us happy and healthy. And it doesn't make us wise. It makes us stressed and stupid and ill and anxious and depressed. And I'm just going to stop there. I mean, unfortunately, the other statistic on the tip of my brain is that it leads teen girls to kill themselves. I mean, this is not a healthy place. With each incremental minute on social media that a girl spends, she's more likely to kill herself. So look at your goal. Look at your goal in light of what society really encourages us to do and say to yourself, okay, is this the right way to achieve my learning or whatever my goal is? And what as like how do I get myself out of the messaging from the external world that kind of works against me? Maybe you need to like have a place in your car, you park your phone away, you leave, you get out, you go somewhere else where like if you know, the back of your brain isn't vigilant about, I know the phone can buzz at any moment. And that's what happens, right? So if you really want to achieve things, chances are you need to leave your tech aside and you need to create a safe space for your own wisdom and your own reflecting to show up for you and with you. And I talk about two, with, and for, because showing up is two, with, and for. Like a lot of our society is two, right? And that's the discussion that does this.
Hmm.
And then there's with, and then there's for. The for has the care, the for has the heart. So
Yeah,
showing up,
and
this whole lexicon that brings us more into the way we're designed to thrive.
yeah, and I would say the four type of connection or relationship that you're building often is the most remembered, right? I love this idea, this quote where people don't remember what you said; they remember how you made them feel.
Right. Maya Angelou, of course.
Yeah, right. Thank you. So I love that because it's you go to a social gathering, you're not going to remember every conversation that was had, but you'll remember that one person who you made a couple jokes with and you really enjoyed their presence and you want to see them and go do some that thing that you said you guys were going to do. You want to do it, you want to go do it later, right? So it's this when you build it for it's like we talked about at the beginning with this whole idea of active listening and being present. It's outside yourself is what it sounds like to me.
Yes. So this is what you were getting at, which is being with the more, not being so self-focused, being other focused. So turning the self-focused mirror outward toward your situational and societal role.
Hmm.
And that's what makes a difference, you're saying.
Yeah. But if I were to also summarize our last point, I think, the book idea, I'm sure many can relate to, but this idea of money, I'm sure just about everybody can relate to, right? Everyone, because we look at goals, everyone, many people always have a money goal, right? It's, I want to earn this much, I want to make this much, I want to do whatever. But what I think is interesting, right? So let's say someone's goal is, I want to earn $100,000 this year. In all honesty, based on what we've also been talking about, I really don't think it's about the goal, right? Doing is important because you won't get there without actually doing anything. If you just sit there in your room and just chant it, it's not going to happen. You got to put in some work. But the more important part is being, right? Because I think there is a certain set of character traits and skill sets that a person earning 100, a million, multiple millions, right? And further have acquired and developed over time. And I think that's really what we want is when someone says, I want to be a millionaire, it's no, you want to be the person that can be a millionaire, right? We've seen this time and time again with lottery winners who will earn an absurd amount of money and then just lose it all And my dad always brings that example up. He goes, fast money, fast problems. And he says, like, he's always told me that example. And it makes sense because you never developed those skill sets, how to properly handle the mindset of that much money. So the first thing you do is you blow it. Maybe you already have a poor spending habit, but you only make a few $1,000s a month, or if that, right? So you have poor spending habits, but you don't have enough to spend. But then you get that millions of dollars in the lottery. You do the same thing you were doing already. Your bad spending habits. So then you lose it all. You don't know how to invest. You don't know how to save. You don't know how to use it as leverage,
Mhm.
and all these things that a normal person who spent 10 years to get that, several millions or whatever, would have.
Mhm.
So I think, that's so important to, like, kind of summarize what we're talking about here is
Yeah.
everyone has goals, but it's really just the systems towards that identity that I think is the biggest marker here.
Yes, the system toward the identity. Yes. And so showing up really does encompass what you were just saying about money. If you truly want to be the person who owns their time, like that's what wealth is. Forget the money.
Yeah.
Wealth is being able to choose what you do with the scarce moments of your life. And what most of us find meaningful is nothing that you can buy. Well, okay, this is once again how society helps to make us miserable. What most of us find meaningful is time with people we care about and is impacting others in a positive, supportive, loving way. Like it's just
Right.
caring about others. That's what feels good.
Right.
Buying,
Having the freedom to care.
having the freedom to do in your moments what feels meaning, right? Which is care. Remember the skill for our societal role is showing up with intent to serve, or I'm sorry, connectedness with intent to serve. That is how we're designed. That is how human beings are designed to, to thrive. So I love this. And we can pause here if you want to maybe do an episode 2, but we come back to the beginning of our needing each other as human beings of I need a moment. I need a moment. Think about that. And you were so successful, Shiva, in shifting how you chose to show up. You stepped right into what I would call truly showing up. And what it is it's literally using the right hemisphere of our brain more than our left. This is our being and caring mode, and this is our get shit done mode, right? I'm going to show you a continuum that I think sticks that I've been told sticks with a lot of people. This is the show up continuum. 1, 2, 3. 1 is red, it's barely there. And then as we move toward green, we've got just showing up in the middle, level 2, and truly showing up level 3 on the right. And this is the invisible system. It's all over. This is the invisible system that's all around us. It's a show up system. Everything shows up. Nature and the wind and the sun and our boss and our stress and our health and how you're attuning to this conversation right now shows up, right? So you're saying it's being, right? And it's being the millionaire now. That's in essence what the mindset of showing up helps us to do.
Yeah. I always find it so unfortunate when things or ideas such as manifestation gets a bad rep because people think it's some voodoo delusion of just sitting there and chanting in your room or something. But like you said, it's exactly what you said. It's embodying the identity, characteristics, and skill sets required for it now, or starting it now
Yes,
to get to that
that's
point.
right.
And kind of like we talked about with the whole exponential growth, it's that small movements there until that inflection point. And that inflection point is when you've hit that identity. But by that point, you've spent all this time building it,
Yeah,
that it means there's no difference to you. That's why they say money is an amplifier, right?
right.
It doesn't really change. Yeah, at a fundamental level, it gives you security and freedom, but it doesn't
Mhm.
change you at a
Nope.
fundamental level of who you are. It just amplifies who you already are. If you're rude to If you're rude to, the service industry, you're probably going to be even more rude with a ton of money. If you donate, you probably will donate more because you're excited that you have more to give. And it just amplifies the portions of who you are, right? For example, if a large sum just came in today, I might spend it on the podcast, right? So it's just amplifying who you already are and what you would have done had
Mhm.
you already had that, which is why I think when they say, manifest that, it's really what we're talking about here of just choosing to show up as that identity today
Yes.
until it meets your reality, which is that inflection point.
Yes, 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 infliction and inflection. Yes, the inflection point.
Yes, yes,
Yeah.
yes, yes. Is it inflection point?
The inflection point, yes, but you're also inflicted with it, which
Yes.
I think is why you were doing that's so interesting.
Great.
But
Thank you.
infliction really has the connotation of the outer world doing negative things to us. The inflection point is when something shifts, but I think both create valuable, thoughts for us to learn
Yeah.
from. So thank you for putting both in there, right? 'Cause
Yeah. But Marcy, this show is called Learn or Be Learned. So I love to ask the guests this closing question of what is one life lesson that either you learn from someone or you want the audience to learn from you as a take home message here?
Love that. Shiva. So what I will tell everybody, and I put it in the book, the one thing we all matter far more than we recognize.
We all matter. I love that. It's
Tremendously. Yeah.
there's a lot of power when you start becoming in line with what you say you're going to do and
Yep.
doing that.
Right. Don't sell yourself short ever, 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 ever. Yeah, and, I'll keep all the stories on the side because you're trying to kind of wrap this up, but, there's a lot of statistics that I typically talk about. They're in both of my TED Talks about how what we think, feel, and do moves through society. We change the world. Never forget it. So show up with that knowledge of the impact you're having at every moment.
I love that. I remember a couple years back, I was having a conversation with a friend, and he made this incredible point. He was like, the same way you talk about how cool it would be to be on like Joe Rogan's podcast or somebody's team, right? Somebody higher up that's doing crazy, amazing things in the podcast space, how you would love to be on their team to learn. Well, what if that's not you someday, right? What if somebody else wants to learn from your team? Why don't you think about it in that way? And I thought that was so empowering and powerful because I realized, you know, the same way I'm looking at that opportunity, someone may in the future look at it towards what I'm doing,
Yeah.
which then kind of goes back to what you're saying is like you don't realize how powerful you are until you
Mhm.
start acting in alignment with what you're doing and saying that you're going to do.
Yep. Absolutely, absolutely. So anyone who's doubting themselves, anyone who's feeling shame, anyone who's feeling not worthy, anyone who's just really stuck, please take a look at showing up. It's a mindset that you need, and it's literally just how nature designed us to thrive.
Yeah. Well, Marcy, thank you so much for being on this show and sharing so much great knowledge and wisdom. All your information will be in the show notes for the people if they're, curious to reaching out and having more. But thank you so much for being here.
Shiva, it has been such a pleasure, and I really look forward to a very long term friendship.